What's the biggest reason the Wolves won Game 4?
Well, I mean, I got to give credit where credit is due to Karl Anthony Towns. We know that he was horrific from three-point range in the first three games of this series. We were wondering where the self-proclaimed best shooting big man in basketball had gone. It was an APB out for him, but he showed up. He showed up big time in a big way last night. Shot 69% from the field, 4 or 5 from three-point range, 20 points in the second half. And obviously that freed a lot of guys up, particularly Anthony Edwards. And so you got to give credit where credit is due. And we got to remember that each and every single game of this series has come down to clutch time. And, you know, it was one of those situations where Minnesota, who ranked 22nd in clutch time moments this season, you know, last night, that wasn't the case. They scored like 8 points. They hit some of their shots. Meanwhile, Dallas, who was playing pretty damn good during clutch time, really struggled. Missed all 5 of their three-point shooting attempts in that particular span. Neutralized Kyrie Irving to some degree. Obviously, to a degree with Luka Doncic as well. Give Kyle Anderson some credit with some defense. He took the assignment. He took on the challenge and did relatively well against Luka Doncic. We can't ignore that. Of course, you got to look at Kyrie Irving, and he wasn't his usual spectacular self. It's just one game. But closing out is something that Kyrie Irving has been able to do. He was 14-0 coming into last night in closeout scenarios, and this is the first time he's lost in a closeout game. So this is definitely foreign territory for him. But that's just another reason to give the Minnesota Timberwolves a boatload of credit, because looking at them do what they did, you just can't say enough about what the moment called for, watching Indiana get swept, even though they fought valiantly against Boston, knowing the odds were so stacked against Minnesota, and to answer the call the way that they did. You got to give credit where credit is due and give them their props. And if we're going to point the finger at Karl Anthony Towns when he's not doing well, we certainly have to reverse course and give him credit where credit is due when he showed up the way that he did last night.
Wish I can argue, but he's sharp in Miami this morning. 100%. Karl Anthony Towns makes 3 threes in a row in the fourth
Must be
quarter.
the sunshine. It's
And
blowing in
he's
his
peppy.
face.
A day off. Look at him. He's flying. They got Brian here. I guess he feels Udonis is coming, so he's sharp. But Stevie's right. I mean, you could look at this 2 different ways. Number one, this should be 2-2 because Minnesota never should have lost both games at home. They should have won game 2. So really where we are, we should be 2-2 in this series instead of 3-1 Dallas. You can look at it that way. Or you can look at it the other way and say, geez, when you go up 3-0 in a series and you have game 4 at home, I think there's 95 examples. Brian might have the stats. And 3/4 of the time minimum, the team wins the game 4. So usually you get a sweep in these spots. And Minnesota showed some wherewithal. They were in some trouble last night. They had a lead. They got caught. And in the fourth quarter on the road, they figured out a way to win. Now, I don't know if that means they're going to win the next 3 games. Kyrie had a terrible game. I said, you were here. Did I say last week that the reason why I like Dallas in this series is because they had 2 closers?
Yes.
Compared to 1 for Minnesota. Well, last night it was the other way around. Minnesota had 2 closers, and Dallas only had the 1 in Doncic. I think that will change. I think Dallas will eventually win a game here, either 5 or 6. Could lose game 5, but I think Dallas eventually will win this series. But give Minnesota credit for last night. They did a heck of a job.
Yeah, so after the game was over last night, I really wanted to find some people in Karl's life to see how he handled everything after Monday, because Monday obviously was a terrible game. It felt like the end of their season. He goes 0 of 8 from 3. He says he takes 1,500 shots a day. He's just getting roasted. He's getting roasted on the TNT set in the arena. And his dad, Karl Sr., who's, like his rock, and his agent, Jess Holtz, they spent some time with him on Monday night, and he was fine. Like he remained having confidence. That's who he is. I know that there are times when he comes off like a little bit goofy, but that kind of helps him in times where he faces some adversity because it enables him to relieve the stress. And, I talked to Karl, and one of the things that Karl said was he wanted to vary his game a little bit. Okay, so his 3-point shot wasn't going. What else can you do that you can control? And if you watch this game, he totally changed his strategy. He really went to the basket. He actually went to the basket 13 times in this game. He's never gone to the basket like that in a playoff game in his career. And look, it wasn't perfect. He didn't have a perfect game. He ran over the Mavericks. They knew that he wasn't going to shoot the 3 early in the game, so they tried to bait him into charges. And Karl commits fouls that aren't always, right there, aren't always the best decision. And he committed a couple of charges, and he was in foul trouble. But he kept his team in the game, and he attacked matchups when he saw it. And then when he had established himself going to the basket, then he looked for that 3-point shot. And finally, all that came around and he started making them. And that was big. And really, it was a part of a bigger game plan change. I mean, Chris Finch, the Wolves coach, he kind of threw it all into the court last night. He changed the matchups. He put Ant Edwards on to Luka. Now, they've been trying to save Ant's energy. He's been running down the end of this game, the end of these games. Luka goes 5 of 15 against Ant. That was huge. So changing up the defensive strategy, changing up the mentality from Karl Towns gives the Timberwolves life going into tomorrow night.
Was last night a bad game or a bad sign for the Mavs? And I'm talking long term here, right? They're going against the Celtics. I'm not just talking about this series.
Bad game. I'm going to go bad game because Irving is so good. Steve gave you the statistic, 14-0 in closeout games. He had a bad game last night. Luka wasn't as good as we've seen him. And by the way, if you've watched the NBA, and I don't watch it nearly as much as our two pals here do, he's the second best player in the league. It's not even close. Jokic is 1 and he's 2. He is so good. He is the second best player in the NBA. Luka. There is not, in my mind, there's not even a. Now, we're going to put LeBron aside. He's 40 years old.
Yeah.
All right. He's the second best player in the league. He is so good. It is unbelievable. And I have enough confidence in him to get another game. Now,
So who's first?
The Celtics, different story. Go ahead.
He said Jokic is first.
Jokic
I feel like
is
this
first.
just turned into a new debate.
Jokic is first. He's 2. He's the second. Brian,
Okay.
he's the second best.
Okay.
I don't think there's any doubt about it. He's the
Stephen
second best
A.,
player.
do you want to go last night a bad game or bad sign, or do you want to react to the fact that he just said they're 1 and 2? Jokic and Luka.
Both the simple. Listen, I think Doggy. Listen, I can dispute it, but the fact of the matter is, Doggy makes a very compelling argument. There's no reason to argue with that right now. With the greatness of Jokic and the greatness that we're witnessing from Luka Doncic, there's no question about it. And I know why Doggy is saying that, because Luka Doncic reminds him of Larry Bird. Doggy don't want to admit it, but that's really where he's going. Luka reminds him of Larry Bird, and I got news for you. That's not far-fetched, because Luka's got that gene and he's got that ability and the ability to control pace and to do the kind of things that he's doing. Larry Bird was absolutely magnificent, and so is Luka Doncic. But I'm going to say it was just a bad game. And the reason why I'm going to say it's a bad game, because Kyrie Irving is not going to shoot 6 for 18 most nights. He's not going to shoot 33% from the field most nights. He's not going to shoot 1 of 6 from three-point range as he does most nights. And Luka Doncic is certainly not going to find himself in a situation where he's shooting 7 of 21 from the field, which is 33% as well. That's not going to happen with Luka Doncic. 36%. That's not going to happen with Luka Doncic. That's not going to happen often. And so I look at it from that standpoint, and I'm going to say it was just a bad game, which is great as they are more than entitled to. That is not something that is normal when it comes to those two brothers right there, and Luka and Kyrie. I firmly believe that.
Yeah, we've played 4 games in this series, and these teams are separated by 8 points. So the fact that it's 3-1, it is really, really tight. And the fact that Minnesota, as you said, Mad Dog, wasn't able to pull out one of those home games, I suspect when this is all over, that's what they're going to really regret, that they weren't able to get one of those. But let me just say a couple of things. One is a big X factor going forward here is Derek Lively. Derek Lively, I said this is a series decided by 8 points over 4 games. Derek Lively is plus 22 when he's on the court for the Mavericks. That super springy, athletic rookie. He makes a huge difference in this series. He's 13 of 13 shooting because he is the relief baskets on those lobs, and he gets putbacks. And not having him last night was a big factor. There was other things going on. You're right, Stephen A., that Doncic and Kyrie just didn't have a good game, and that was a factor. And I don't know where Lively's going to be in the next game or two. I think there's a chance he's going to come back and play. But as you watch him play, his energy and his ability to bounce around everywhere is his game. And if he's got a sore neck, he's basically got whiplash. I got to see how he looks. So that's a factor. The other thing I'm going to say is I would never predict any team down 3-0. I don't care what teams are. I don't care if you're playing the worst team in the league and the best team. I would never predict anybody winning 4 straight. But I would say this. If we're ever going to see it, I do believe it's this scenario where the team that has home court advantage is the one that's down. And when they win game 4, they get to go back home for game 5. That is a huge difference because, and this just happened last season, when the Heat were stunning the Celtics in the Eastern Finals, got up 3-0, the Celtics win game 4, then they get to go home for game 5. And then if there's a deciding game 7, it's at home. Now, obviously, the Celtics didn't finish it off. And I wouldn't expect the Wolves to finish it off. But I'll just say that. And then one last thing I'm going to say, just to point this out. Again, not that I think this is going to happen. The Wolves are 3-0 this year, facing elimination.
That's where I was going.
2 of those being on the road.
That's where I was going.
Go ahead.
That's where I was going. 3-0 in elimination games, these Timberwolves. And so we've got to listen. And then we got to also think about who they were 2-0 against. They were 2-0 against the defending champions, led by, as you would say, Doggy, the best player on the planet, Jokic. And they came back from a 3-2 deficit and won both closeout games. And one was on the road in the Game 7. If you can win a Game 7 on the road in Denver, why can't you win a Game 5 on your home turf in Minnesota in a series where each single game has been decided by a grand total of 8 points and come down to clutch time? It is plausible that they can make this series very, very interesting. And again, we're not going to predict that 155-0, all of a sudden somebody's going to win 4 straight. But is it possible that there's a scenario where a Game 7 can be forced after being down 0-3? If we saw Boston do it last year against Miami, who's to rule out the possibility of it happening with Minnesota against Dallas?
Not impossible. I mean, but I don't think they're going to do it. I just don't think they're going to. Even if they had to play a Game 7, I still like Doncic and Irving in the 7th game. I mean, those two in big spots at the end of these games are going to make enough shots for them to win. But I think Brian made a great point. If you're Minnesota, you say to yourself, okay, we played 3 close games. We could have won any of them. And then when we faced elimination on the road, we won a Game 4. We got Towns back in the mix. We got a home game. We've just lost 2 in a row. We're due to win 1. We go to Dallas. Who the heck knows?
Yeah.
And we got a chance then to get a 7th game at home. So it's not impossible. I would be shocked. But I think the other thing is, too, it's going to happen one of these years. Nobody thought it was going to happen in baseball. Red Sox beat the Yankees. I mean, one of these years, somebody is going to come from 3-0 down to win an NBA playoff series. I don't think it's going to be this team, but it's going to happen in our lifetime. We'll see it.